Join us for an unforgettable conversation with Rand.
Timmerman. Yep.
Rand, say your name. I'm sorry.
At Rand Timmerman.
Okay, let's start again. Take two. Matter of fact, let's do this. 1 second. Welcome to another episode of More Than Therapy, where today we meet with Rand Timberland as he shares the incredible, gritty, true story of hiking the entire 2,200-mile Appalachian Trail with his brother Ron, both in their early 70s. As Vietnam combat veterans, salute, and highly successful professionals, an attorney and a commercial pilot, they set out to conquer the longest footpath trail only in the world. Only about 500 people complete this each year. And for Rand, it was the hardest thing he ever did when nobody was shooting at him. This isn't just a tale of physical endurance. It's a deep dive into the emotional and spiritual challenges they faced, including overcoming alcohol addiction and processing profound grief. Prepare for serious moments, humor, and a powerful lesson in intentional achievement at any age. I introduce to you today Rand Timmerman. Thank you for appearing on the More Than Therapy podcast.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate the opportunity.
Indeed, indeed. So Rand, thank you for your service. Vietnam was a war, if that's what you want to call it. Because there was so many things other than just a war, and what was the purpose and the care or lack of care, as you described to me earlier, regarding after this supposed war. The only war I believe that we did not win, right? As how could we win? And what was the purpose of us going there anyway? But I digress. The Appalachian Trail. I've only read about it. I've only seen it in the movies. I've never ever been there. I might have traveled through there once, maybe going to a certain part of the country, but I remember looking up at it and I was like, well, but you and your brother Ron, 2,200 miles. That's like, I don't know, going from here to Vegas or something, right?
Oh, it's in the mountains, so you're not flat.
Right, right, right. Can you unpack that statement for me? The statement being the hardest thing I ever did when nobody was shooting at me.
Well, when people are shooting at you, that's a whole new dilemma and paradigm of hardship, if you will. And
Mhm.
yeah, my brother and I were both combat veterans in the Vietnam War. He was in the Army, I was in the Marine Corps, and he was in central Vietnam. I was in the northern part, right up against the border, a lot of it. And yeah, we both saw a lot of crazy stuff, and it was traumatic. I mean, my first night in Vietnam, I was with some troops that were leaving the next day, and one of them blew his brains out right beside me, basically. And that was a real bummer. Like, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? He just gotten a Dear John letter that his girlfriend that he was going to go home to had met somebody else in a whirlwind romance, and they were just gotten married, and he couldn't take it. And that was kind of a brutal thing to start out the war. And then, there's a lot of other things too, but that's a whole book in
Yeah,
itself.
indeed. And I'm sorry. I mean, that set the precedence of everything to come after it, didn't it? It was just like, I mean, how old were you when it? 18, 19, 20? How could
I
even that
was,
kind of,
yeah, I was
hmm?
20.
How can a mind that probably only experienced some college, high school, family get-togethers and things like that process such a profound event? It takes a remarkable person to be here today after experiencing that and so much more after that, right?
Yeah, yeah, I'm probably one of the luckiest men on the planet to even be here. And and now, of course, I'm 80 years old, and most of those guys didn't even make it when they came back home. And alcohol was a big part of that for many of us, and I struggle with that too, although it didn't really bother me for a long time. But why did we hike the Appalachian Trail in our early 70s? Well, the reason was it's all Edie's fault. Edie was my brother's wife, and when he came back from Vietnam, I came back and I went to OCS, became an officer, and spent 3 more years in the Marine Corps, and ended up being a legal officer by a real weird fluke. I may have been the only one in the Marine Corps that didn't have a college education, let alone a law degree, but that did happen, and it gave me a career path that I'd never imagined. So, but when my brother came back, he started dating our mother's best friend, Edie, who was 14 years older with 7 children and divorced. And they became Mormons. They moved to Utah and had a fantastic life. My brother was a bishop. I became a lawyer. I had a pretty good career for many, many years, self-employed. Had quite a few people working for me at various times, and life was pretty good. I was haunted by really bad nightmares. It's a funny thing, Mr. Blue, but when I came back and after I got out of the Marine Corps, I'm going to college and getting my degrees, and I got a wife and 2 kids, and I'm thinking, it's amazing, I'm okay. I went through all that stuff over there, saw all the battles, all the bloodshed, all the gore, all of it. And yet I came back, and other than drinking too much sometimes, I seemed to be doing very, very well. I worked very hard, and had a huge resentment against poverty because Ronnie and I both grew up in a very poor family. Our father was a Mustang pilot during World War II, and he actually got polio right after Ronnie was born and ended up paralyzed from the waist down. So that kind of put us in a real bad, and we were in a very poor place anyway, a very rural village, more cows than people. But I also had a pretty good childhood. I was driving tractors by the time I was 12 years old. And so there were a lot of good aspects to it too. We were taught to be pretty independent and so on. And I was very patriotic. I wanted to serve my country. I wanted to go to Vietnam. I had no idea how bad it was going to end up.
Right.
You talked about that. It took me about 10 years after I came back to process the fact that we got our butts kicked. We lost, and yet we had it won. In 1968, after Tet, we won the war. Every NVA regiment that came down into South Korea on the Tet offensive, not in South Vietnam, and the Tet offensive was destroyed. We destroyed the Viet Cong army. By August of 1960, we had won the war. That's where I was, my perspective on it. And then we lost it all anyway because of bad policies and so on. And that was a bummer. I have to say that it was a real bummer. But anyway, Ronnie
Now,
married.
how did your sister-in-law, your mom's best friend that your brother married, how did she convince you, or what was it that she said that made you say, you and Ron decide we're doing the AT now?
She died.
Mm.
She died. So when Edie had a massive stroke in 2011, and they're in Utah in St. George. Now, at that point, they've got 7 kids, 27 grandkids, and 27 great-grandchildren. Mormon children marry very young, and they have a lot of fun, and they create a lot of kids. So he had a really big family, but when she had the stroke, she was in a wheelchair from that point. And then she never got better, Mr. Blue. She just got a whole bunch of mini strokes. And Ronnie took care of her by himself for over 6 years because he wouldn't let anybody else, of course. And then she passed in November of 2017. And I had never been to Utah. I had never seen my brother in his home out there. They always came east in the summertime because half the family lived, on the East Coast. And we would get together maybe once a year. And my younger brother, who's a drinker, and I would, we'd have a party and he and I'd get buzzed up. And of course, Ronnie's not drinking. And then we make fun of him. He's a bishop in the Mormon church. He doesn't have any fun. Look how boring he is. I could be a real jerk, Mr. Blue. But that,
Okay.
we had a good relationship and with all my siblings, but I didn't really know my brother that well. So in January of 2018, after Edie died, I went out and spent some time with him, and we were walking in the Utah desert. And I learned a lot about my brother I didn't know. I mean, I knew he'd been a commercial pilot. Last gig he had done was flying tourists in the Grand Canyon. And he flew commercial, but it wasn't people. It was usually cargo, right? It was only at the end of his career he was flying people in the Grand Canyon. Which is kind of interesting, I think. I would have liked to have been on that plane. That would have been fun. But anyway, so he said, I'm going to hike the Appalachian Trail. I go, Ronnie, that's crazy. I'm 72. You're 71. There's no way. He said, I'm going to do it. I've been planning on it. I got to do something. This grief is overwhelming, and I got to get back to nature and find myself again. And I said, okay, well, I'll go with you. When are you going to start? And he goes, March 22nd. So, Mr. Blue, on March 22nd of 2018, in a snowstorm, we started hiking from Springer Mountain, Georgia, to go to Katahdin Mountain in Maine, 2,200 miles. As you said, the longest footpath trail only in the whole world. And it goes up and down over 600 mountains. 300 of them are named. It has 465,000 feet of elevation changes. That's almost 500,000 feet of going up or down. And I was pretty convinced we wouldn't be able to do it, to be honest with you. Scared, actually.
How does that work?
Yeah.
It just blows my mind to have to walk that trail. Are there like little huts that you can go and stay in overnight? I mean, how does that work?
They call them shelters. There are a lot of those. My brother stayed in one once, I believe. Well, I know he did for sure. The problem with the shelters was there was never enough room, and they were usually filled up by 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Ronnie and I would start at daybreak and hike. We averaged 11 miles a day, which is amazing in the mountains, but it was usually in the late afternoon by the time I got finished. Ronnie hiked south most days, and I hiked north. And you're going to say, how the heck do you do that? Well, we had 2 vehicles. I asked Ronnie how he was going to do it. He said, I'm going to take a bus down to Springer Mountain and start walking. I said, well, that's not a very good plan. So we ended up driving 2 vehicles and went down Springer Mountain, and we did a leapfrog thing. There's a road of some sort. A lot of them are not very good roads, crossing the Appalachian Trail, usually between 10 and 15 miles apart. So I like to brag. I slept in a tent every night, which I did. Usually it was only a few feet from my truck. And in the morning, Ronnie would get in his car and drive down into whatever valley there was, take a road, go down and go back up to the next point on the Appalachian Trail. So I would hike north and he would hike south. And then he would get my truck and drive back around to where his car was. And then we would just stay right there till the next day. So that's kind of how we did it. So we didn't carry a full pack every day, thank God. I don't think we could have done it. The extra weight would have been, but we had to do it in Smoky Mountains. There's 2 35-mile sections, and Priest. There's there's a few places where we had to carry everything with us and do it the traditional way. But most of the time I was carrying about a 20-pound pack, carried a lot of water because a lot of people didn't have enough water, emergency supplies, stuff like that. I gave away water purification stuff. We tried to help out hikers out as much as we could. It was amazing adventure. I fell down every day. I mean, literally every day. Broke 4 hiking poles. Dealt with a lot of critters. I came around a corner one morning. I was by myself at this point. Things had spread out. We were in the Shenandoah Mountains by then, so we were in southern Virginia. And I come around this corner, there's a bear right in front of me, Mr. Blue, a huge black bear. And I've seen black bears, and I did quite a bit of hiking on my own. When you come back from combat and you have a lot of things going on, and I would go on these getaway solo things, and I would go just in the woods 2 or 3 days by myself, hike, camp, and like that. A lot of times in the Smoky Mountains, not a lot, but some. And there are a lot of bears there. And so I was familiar with bears, and they will fake charge you, and then you have to fake charge them, and you can't run away from a bear because they will assume your food and just come out. They can't see very good, and they can go 25 miles an hour. So I come around the trail, and there's this black bear right in front of me. I mean, like 15 feet away max. And I just froze, and he froze. One paw is up in the air. He just froze the instant he saw me. We're staring at each other, and I'm looking at him, and he is huge. He's that big. He must have been like a 300-pounder, and his head is like a bowling ball. And he's right in front of me, staring right at me. And I'm looking at him. I think, you are the most beautiful creature I have ever seen in my life. He just glistened. His fur was the blackest black I've ever seen. He's staring right at me. I reached back for my phone, which is my camera, to bring it around, take his picture. And when I did, he whirled and ran down that trail and then down the mountain. Now, the day before, I had seen a bear, and that one was quite a ways away, and he just stepped off the trail and disappeared. I never heard a sound. But this one went, whoa! And a guy walks up behind me and goes, what's that? And I said, that's a bear. And he said, there's no way that's a bear. And I said, that's a bear. And it sounded like a caterpillar, was going down the mountain, pushing trees over, and rocks are flying. And I mean, it was unbelievable. So that was kind of an amazing experience right there.
Well, man, I would have lost my mind if that was me. You're quite an incredible man, Rand. You have a book, and I like talking to authors because I and my partner were both authors as well. The title of your book is called A Spiritual Passage. I did not get a chance to read it before this broadcast, but did you begin the hike looking for a spiritual journey, or did the journey become spiritual as you went along this trail?
It became spiritual. I had no idea I would ever write a book about it. I did take a lot of pictures. Ronnie and I hiked it, each did it a different way. He was more just marching head down. I mean, there was days he might take one picture. For him, it was get her done, marching like in a military thing. And for me, it was like, I'm never going to walk this way again. I'm going to take it all in. And I would stop and look at things. I would go around a corner and I go, oh my God, look at that. I'll never see anything like that again. I would take a picture. I mean, some days I'd take 40 or 50 pictures. And so when I got done, I had all these pictures. I ended up, and he had a journal. I had a journal. They were completely different. So it ended up being something I did for the family originally. And then after a while, I realized, because I talked about how I got sober in it, it could be inspiring to people, especially people who were suffering with addiction and things like that. Fear, fear of drinking, the fear of not drinking. I had that syndrome for a while. And so I put all that stuff in there too. And then Ronnie, and we both had spiritual experiences on the trail that were unbelievable. On Father's Day in 2018, Ronnie was in a really bad spot as far as his emotional and spiritual situation goes. And we actually ran into a ranger that we had seen the day before, and it was so dark. One of us said, we need a flashlight. I mean, it was incredibly dark that day, dark, gloomy. Father's Day, my brother's not, he's feeling a lot of pain, emotional pain. And he came around a corner, and there's a spot of light that looks like a huge, I don't know. There's a picture of it in the book. He took a picture of this moment where this big circle of light is way down the trail, and there's something in the middle of it. And at first he thought, oh my God, I'm going to die. And he felt like he should run away. And then he said, I'm not going to. I've never ran away from anything. And then he realized it could have been Jesus in there. It could have been Buddha. It could have been, I don't know, but he felt this powerful sense of peace came over him. And he realized that it felt to him like Edie was saying, Ron, I'm here with Dad. It's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. And it put him on a different plane spiritually, took away a lot of pain. He felt like that they were there with him and that they were part of the journey. And then I had a similar experience in the Smoky Mountains. I got in a bad situation right before dark. I hiking by myself. I had to pitch my tent on the trail where the sides drop off. Both sides drop off hundreds and hundreds of feet straight down, and it's only about 20 feet across. And the rain and the storms were coming up, and I got in the tent. And then during the night, the wind, the way the canyon was down below on my south side, it was like a funnel. It was wide, and then it narrowed right to where I was basically. And the winds were coming up through. It sounded like freight trains coming up the valley and then up the side of the mountain and right over to my right and then to my left. And oh my God, and this tent is shaking like crazy. And then one would come and it would go right over me. And my brother said, "What are you doing? Hanging on? Were you hanging onto the rods of the tent that held it up?" I said, "Heck no, I was pushing down with the stakes with my feet and my hands as hard as I could because it felt like I was in a body bag." And that tent was collapsing like an accordion, only about 5 times per second. It was beating the crap out of me. And I realized if I get blown off this mountain, I'm dead. It felt like I was in a body bag. And I felt like there's no way I can survive this. And it went on and on and on. And I'm praying to God, hey, big guy, I've been a pretty good boy the last few years. I'd quit drinking 4 years before we started the hike. And I got sober. I did the program and I did the deal. And then I was helping other men. And so I felt like, hey, God, I've been doing some pretty good stuff here and I really don't want to die. But if that's the plan, then I will accept it. If this is what you want from me, then I will accept it. But really rather not die. And I didn't die, obviously. And, finally it went on for hours. I thought it would never end. It was almost worse than being shot at in a way. And then just before daylight, as soon as it started getting light, the wind eased off and I survived. And then I realized God did have a plan. And I've been a busy boy ever since, helping people in recovery and living a life of joy instead of trepidation and fear. You counsel people a lot about fear. I watched some of your awesome presentations and podcasts, and you do a great job helping veterans a lot too. I know that. So yeah, you can relate, I'm sure.
Thank you. Thank you for everything you've done and continue to do. You and Ron, both combat veterans, went on to have very successful careers, a thing that not a lot of people do, especially after that particular war. How did that shared history of such success, both the trauma of war and the decades of post-military life, how did it prepare you for the unique challenges of going over this monstrous mountain trail?
We both came from a hard scrabble life, but we had a father and a mother who would not give up. My dad was a hardworking man. He made things so that he could roll himself around. He was an auto mechanic for many years. He was a heck of a mechanic. And he made things so that he would have chairs with wheels and, things to go under the cars with wheels. And he worked very hard under very dire circumstances financially. They didn't pay mechanics a heck of a lot in those days, but so we had this kind of a drive to be successful. We could see other people around us doing a lot better economically. And Ronnie and I think we're both, well, I was driven certainly, the fear of poverty for a long time. And then the military trains you to, get a mission, have a goal, and work at it as best you can. And sometimes it's life and death. And you don't even know what the outcome's going to be, but a lot of people don't know how they're going to react to combat. For example, I was afraid I might be a coward, and I did not have any spiritual spirituality once I got involved in combat, and I just couldn't believe there could possibly be a God and let all this what was happening. I felt like men that were much better than me were being slaughtered right next to me, and I just couldn't. But it filled me with rage. The idea that anybody would try to kill me was extremely upsetting. I did if I had a movie and I could see what I did in combat, I probably would be appalled in terms of my uh, ire and my rage, how upset I would get, and how angry I would be, and then afterwards, it's like, oh my God, what just happened? And then you got to deal with that. And the way you deal with it is you have a mission and you just go on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, because that's what we learn how to do, right? And then so when we came back, I knew I wanted to be a lawyer. Well, I'm married with a couple kids. I got to go to college. I'm working part-time jobs. Ronnie was the same thing, kind of a different field. He kind of took after our father, who was a Mustang pilot in World War II. And Ronnie was a very good pilot. I knew I was not going to be a good pilot. I mean, I have a pilot's license. I did go through that, but I was not the pilot my father was by any stretch. He could do things with airplanes that were unbelievable. Ronnie was similar to him, but yeah. So we had a courage, I guess you would say, to face life. Unlike a lot of the veterans came back who had all kinds of problems, most of them just could not get out of their head some of the things that happened to them. And they never looked forward. They were always looking behind them, right? Kind of afraid or whatever. And Ronnie and I were like, nope, I'm going to do this. And for a long time, alcohol wasn't a huge problem for me as long as I kept really, really busy, which I did. And in the end, but I had the nightmares, so I used alcohol to, medicate myself for a long time. And then eventually, if you're an alcoholic, it's going to take over, and that's what happened in my early 60s. And I had to take some action on that. I ended up in the VA for the very first time at 65 years old in handcuffs. And spent a week in a psychological ward.
Oh man, I'm so sorry that you went through that.
Yeah. Well,
How did hiking this how did hiking this trail, address your struggle with alcohol addiction and Ron's struggle with grief over losing his wife? I mean, how did it help you confront these issues in a way that regular life doesn't allow you to?
well, it took us back to nature. It was kind of every day we knew what we were going to try to do, and we would focus in on that. There were a lot of people around us, especially in the beginning, not so much at the end, hardly anybody, but um, and so it was, physical energy produces some sense of serenity and peace, I think. That's what it did for us, and a lot of pain, but and fatigue. I don't know. And once I got used to it, it was exhilarating a lot of the time. The beauty on the trail, the people, awesome stories I can tell you. One real quick. You get into a bubble where you see the same people, and either somebody gets ahead or somebody gets behind. Eventually, you don't see them anymore. But there was an Oriental man with us. It was kind of dressed up like a samurai, warrior with the robes and stuff. It had a pack, and then he had this kind of like a headdress. He could have had a sword in his belt for all I know. And he was like a little short guy, 5'4" maybe, but really stocky, solid, strong man, And he saw me limping because I had an artificial knee. My left leg and my right leg is a half inch shorter from other problems and bone on bone for many years. And so one day he came up to me, he said, I think I can help you with your knees. And he grabbed my hands. He said, just let me hold my hands. So I'm standing there holding hands, and I think he's praying, right? And he's talking in a low voice, and I'm just kind of looking down, and this goes on for a few minutes. People are walking by us like, what the heck? And then all of a sudden I hear him say Macbeth. And I realize he's quoting Shakespeare. So finally I said, thank you very much. I feel a lot better. I think I'm good to go now.
I know that's right.
It's a little bit of therapy there.
Indeed, indeed. Your book, A Spiritual Passage. You have a copy on you? Can I see it real quick? Can you show the audience?
Yes,
Look at
sir.
that book. Look at that. All right. A Spiritual Passage. Your book is a journal with 500 pictures If you had to look at one picture that perfectly captures a moment of emotional or spiritual breakthrough on the trail, what would that moment be?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question. There's one here. If I can find it real quick. That's my brother on top of a mountain in Pennsylvania, up above the Lehigh River. You can see the river down below, right?
Yes.
And that is the steepest cliff on the Appalachian Trail. It's 1,000 foot high. And when Ronnie climbed it, he came across a girl took that picture of him. And when he got partway up it, he found these two ladies who were just stuck there. They were afraid to go down and they were afraid to go. They were frozen with fear. And my brother said, I'll help you. And he took their packs one by one and took them up to the top and then went back down and helped the girls up one at a time to the top. And then they took that picture of him. That's the kind of man my brother is.
Yeah, I know that's right. That's right. I'm so sorry that you're experiencing this pain and this grief, but I thank you for being here today and sharing.
Yes,
If
sir.
you could distill your 2,200-mile journey into a single piece of advice for someone in their 50s who thinks that their days of intentional achievement are over, what would you tell them?
Well, I think my mantra was one step at a time. And I think that would be my inspirational message of anybody that's suffering with any kind of addiction, whether it be, or addiction or trouble or pain, grief, loss of a loved one, or just plain old age. I have a lot of friends who are they just sit on the couch and wait for the inevitable, and I don't think you need to do that. I think one step at a time we could do anything. I can tell you of an old lady who has got an oxygen bottle and a walker, and one step at a time every day she gets up, she takes care of herself, and then she goes out into the world with a smile. And she does volunteer work and she does the very best she can every day. And I'm sure when she goes to bed at night, she thanks God for giving her one more day of service. And I try to do the same thing every day. My service is to help men who have a terrible addiction, and I see them when they are at their absolute worst, and then I watch them be transformed into a sober man, and they become the men that God always wanted them to be, and they can't hardly believe it's possible.
Mhm.
One step at a time, we can do almost anything.
Indeed, one step at a time and one moment at a time. Well,
That's
thank you, Mr. Rand Timmerman, for your appearance today on the More Than Therapy podcast, where you told us about your 2,200-mile journey with your brother, which gave you so much insight and solidified another core memory for you and your lovely brother, Ron. I wish for you the best and thank you for everything that you've given to us and will continue to give us in this world. And I'm glad that you're continuing to address your wellness and recovery, not only by sharing your story, by addressing your wellness and doing the things you need to do for yourself. I encourage anybody to purchase this book, this volume of love, this endeavor of blood, sweat, and tears, right, Rand? But a beautiful, beautiful story captured by beautiful photos, over 500 pictures of this trail of him and his brother going through this remarkable, astounding journey, over a 2,200-mile journey in which they address their pain and their addiction and their love for one another together. Thank you, Rand, for everything you do.
Thank you.
Can you tell people how to go about purchasing this book or getting a copy?
Well, if they type in a spiritual passage on, any internet, and it will pop right up. Amazon will pop up, or they can go to my website. It's just my name, all lowercase, Rand Timmerman, all run together, no dots or anything. Rand Timmerman. and they'll be on my website. And then there's all, they can link on Amazon, or there's thrift books and other ones on there, and go that way. And then there's some videos and stuff like that, more information about me, or they can email me at rand.timmerman@gmail.com, and we'll figure out how to get them a book, and probably can autograph it. So yeah, and I would appreciate that. I do know of people who have gotten the book who are facing very severe difficulties, and in at least a couple cases, I've been told that
Right.
made a difference in their lives. It gave them inspiration to do something better, something different for
Indeed.
themselves. Yeah, and then for
Okay.
others.
All right. Thank you once again for appearing on the More Than Therapy podcast. And thank you for listening or watching the More Than Therapy podcast for this special episode with Rand Timmerman. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the More Than Therapy podcast, available wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. In the meanwhile, be great and be well.